Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent. Thanks for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk programs as we chat with the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting. Well, it's well known that .22 rifles are really picky about ammunition. Simply switching your brand of ammunition can significantly increase your accuracy. Well, I was doing some research on that and got to thinking about it, and I thought, well, let's call up Roy Huntington and discuss the reasons why .22s are so picky and some of the stuff that you can do that's simple and relatively inexpensive to increase the accuracy of your .22 rifle. So here's Roy Huntington and I as we discuss why your .22 is so darn picky. Well, howdy there, Roy, and your stuffed up nose.
And hello back to you, sir. Yeah.
I noticed when we first jumped on this video link that you were a little stuffy. I'm just coming through it myself. I think everybody's almost healthy here, so hopefully you'll be out of it here pretty soon. But I think we've got a fun topic today, and it was inspired by something that I think it got published yesterday, but maybe today. We have to do a newsletter story every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I noticed when we first jumped on this video link that you were a little stuffy. I'm just coming through it myself. I think everybody's almost healthy here, so hopefully you'll be out of it here pretty soon. But I think we've got a fun topic today, and it was inspired by something that I think it got published yesterday, but maybe today. We have to do a newsletter story every couple of weeks. Each editor does. So I did one on a rifle that I use the term rifle loosely. I just got shown by my buddy, my FFL dealer. He goes, "Here's something I bet you've never seen," and he brought out what turned out to be a Hamilton number 7 rifle. And you'll have to read my story about all the strange stories and where it came from. But when I said something to Roy, "Hey, have you ever seen a Hamilton rifle?" And of course, Roy goes, "You mean like this one?" So, of course, Roy's always got one of everything. But anyway, that got us talking about .22s and rifles. And I got to thinking something I've kind of been looking at lately is it's well known that .22 rifles are really picky about ammunition. One of the best ways to accurize a .22 is to simply buy a whole bunch of different brands of ammo and see which one's best. And that's just accepted. A lot of folks know that. But I got to thinking after talking about these rifles and where they came from and .22s, let's talk about why your .22 is so picky. So you've done a lot of stories in that regard, haven't you, Roy?
I have, because I have no life. And I'm the guy that I think I was shooting my .22 with iron sights at 300 yards before you could say that you did that without people laughing and throwing things at you,
Yeah.
And nowadays, of course, that's a thing,
Yeah, exactly.
Long range, 22 long rifle stuff. So yes, through the years, I've pursued that because ever since I got my first rifle, which I was 10 years old, it was a Remington Model 514 single shot .22, iron sights, and I used to stretch that out as far as I could go, kind of, and I think I connected on a jackrabbit or two who were unfortunate enough to be sitting where my bullet landed.
You were surprised and they were surprised.
Yeah, but I mean, chasing 100, 125 yards, and that's when it dawned on me. I thought, boy, you know what, if you had a better sight, or even when I was young, I thought, maybe how do you make this trigger easier to pull and things like that. So yes, I have explored this through the years. I've learned a lot.
Well, it's one of those things you can really go down the rabbit hole because even I think more so than like centerfire rifles, there are so many variables in a .22 rifle. Everything from the quality of the build, because .22s often, not always, but often tend to be a little lesser quality for price, ease of manufacture. The ammunition is widely variable. The sighting systems range from essentially rudimentary to almost nothing to, the most sophisticated sights we have available today. Triggers run the gamut from awful, breaking a green stick to, precision glass rods. There's just so much going on there. And that's the reason a lot of people really dive down into that rabbit hole of making the 22 the most accurate that they can.
Well, if you're really interested in that, if you use Dr. Google, there are 2 or 3 forums full of people. And when you read what they talk about, I mean, they go to fist fight blows
They do.
over quantifying rim thickness variations amongst a standard lot of 10 cc.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the people who are chasing that kind of accuracy.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, there's a bit of a balance. I understand the chasing of mechanical accuracy, but 22s are sort of so fragile in traveling through the air that, I mean, the smallest amount of wind can completely destroy, this sub 1 inch group at 100 yards you have going on. I've done a lot of shooting at 100 yards here with a wide cross section of 22 rifles, and it's really interesting because one of my I have 2 really accurate 22 rifles: a Ruger Precision rimfire rifle, which is a bolt action gun, and then I have a pretty old Anschutz bolt action 22 rifle, a 141. With the right ammo, on a good day, I have chased a half an inch at 100 yards with those guns. But it has to be completely still,
Yeah.
I mean, it is so amazing because, I'll feel the lightest little breeze on my cheek, or down at 100 yards, I'll notice the leaves are just moving a little tiny bit. They're just barely moving, and my group's 3 inches.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I mean, that's really the first thing I wanted to get into is kind of the internal and external ballistics of 22s. And this is an area where I tend to geek out a little bit, but stop and think about, you're not putting 180 grains of a center fire bullet downrange at 3,000 feet per second. And with most 22, it's right around 1,000 to 1,100. And you got to remember that in standard atmosphere, the speed of sound, supersonic, is 1,089 feet per second. So bullets tend to do crazy things when they go from supersonic to subsonic. And when you start out right at that kind of wall, it's inherently less stable. You've got a 36 or 40 grain bullet that doesn't have the mass that 180 or 300 grain bullet has. And then you throw in all those other factors. Maybe the barrel's not quite as well made as your Weatherby. That's, again, and also then you talk about the variation of the rounds themselves. Factory ammo is pretty good, but 22 ammo is made 20 times faster than even production centerfire rifle ammo. So they're spitting that stuff out faster than the human eye can pick out. So there tends to be a lot more variation. So did I miss anything there?
No, I agree completely. I mean, I've seen 22 long rifle ammunition being made. You may have too. And 1 million rounds a day is easy.
Yeah, it just flows out of this machine.
I mean, I saw it was a dumpster sized container that was full of loaded 22 long rifle ammunition that had been made that day.
Wow.
Well, that's something I've learned, though, is in reading these forums and what these people post and stuff like that, is that because you made a good point. I mean, if you buy a $500 Ruger bolt-action hunting rifle and a Mossberg or a Savage or any of their economy guns, I mean, you're going to probably shoot an inch at 100 yards with a pretty good cross-section ammunition. And a lot of that is, like you say, it's the ballistics, but a lot of it is the consistency that they do with CNC machining for these higher quality rifles. And so, on the one hand, I look at a CZ, I look at an Anschutz, I look at this Ruger Precision rifle. What you'll find there is consistency. In other words, the chambers are done correctly. The bore is exactly what it should be, .222, and is consistent the length of the barrel. The steel is stable. The triggers are high quality. And it's funny though, because when you do that, suddenly 22s start to get more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when you see these people chase, well, like federal gold medal match ammunition for 22s, and Lapua and SSK, and just about everybody does that. The irony of all of this, though, is that I will do just what you said. I'll have 20 different kinds of 22 long rifle ammunition and a new 22 to test. And I go to my best quality, $10 a box, super green tag match 22 ammo, and I shoot it, and I think, wow, that was a pretty good group. Hey, we're talking 1.5 inches at 100 yards. That's pretty good. And then I'll get like CCI mini mag hollow point, right? Or Remington box ammo that you buy at, at Sam's Club.
Yeah.
And it'll outshoot the match ammo.
Yep.
I mean,
that was the next point I was going to make. It's fascinating to me that, typically in most ammunition, rifle ammunition, the more you pay, generally speaking, the better it is in terms of accuracy, right? 22s, it's all over the board. Like you said, I've had the big plastic tub ammo outshoot match ammo in one certain gun. And it's fascinating to me that happens. But the thing is, you can't reliably predict without testing that, I may have this, like you said, a nice Anschutz bolt action with good glass and all the bells and whistles. And then it turns out it likes the, 10 cents a round, bulk, cheap, 40 grain, round nose lead. And it shoots a group 3 times the size using that really expensive, dollar a bullet kind of stuff.
Well, I learned something the hard way about, it was probably 10 years ago. Who here thinks, 22s, you never have to clean the bore, right? I always did. When I was growing up, it's a 22. You don't have to clean it. It's okay. And so I didn't, and I noticed I was shooting my Anschutz one day, and I thought, well, something's going on, and it's just not shooting the way it should shoot. And so, you check the scope, and I'm looking at the ammo, and I changed other ammos, and I tried everything, retorqued the stock screws, and on a lark, I took it up into my shop, and I gave the barrel a good scrubbing.
Yeah.
And, because I looked at it first with a bore scope, and there was a lot of leading in there, which you don't tend to think with standard velocity 22s, but it gets in there. And brought it back down, put a dry patch through it, fired a round to, clear everything else, to dirty up the bore, and then it shot like a laser beam again. So, what did this make me do? Go and get a half a dozen other 22 rifles, right? And so I targeted each of them very carefully, and they shot about what I thought they were going to shoot. And I cleaned all of their bores. This was an all-day job, of course, because we have no life. And I cleaned all of their bores, and you know what? Every single one shot better. So, ladies and gentlemen, break out that Ruger 1022 that you've had for 25 years and have never run a patch down the bore. Clean it, and I think you'll be very surprised.
What an amazing concept, cleaning rifles. Wow.
I know. It's just, I know somebody who took two bolt action 308 rifles of modest, I forget, I think they were Savage hunting rifles, right? And he put 3,000 rounds of 308 ammunition through both of them. On one of them, he broke it in very carefully. Just shoot 3 shots, clean, shoot 5 shots, clean, whatever one of those processes you think is the one to do, that's what he did. The other one, he never cleaned it at all for all 3,000 rounds. And interestingly enough, at the end of everything, both rifles shot the same.
No
and
kidding.
The one that he had never cleaned shot better than it did when it was new.
Yeah.
So,
That's
I
funny.
mean, I'm not saying it's always the case with 22s, but it might be. I think what I am learning about 22s is what you said, which is the ammunition manufacturing is so variable. I mean, because if you get a loaded 308 from this company and a loaded 308 cartridge from that company and you mic them, they're pretty much going to be dead nuts the same.
Yeah.
You know? But I notice with 22s, if you measure the rim thickness, you measure the case wall, the bullets, they tend to be, I think they're supposed to be 223 to 225, I think, but they're kind of all over too. And, of course, they have that silly heeled bullet, which is the same diameter as the case.
Yeah.
And, so what I found with experimenting with that Ruger precision rifle is that if you chamber different cartridges, you will see some of them, because their overall length is a little bit different, you'll see some of them will chamber closer to the rifling, some of them will jump to the rifling, and then that also depends on what the headspace is, and that's where you measure the case rim, right?
Yep.
And so if you get a case rim that is consistent and matches the chamber of your rifle, and then you find a cartridge that is chambers deep enough that it just starts to touch the rifling, that's probably going to be the magic round for your gun.
Exactly. And the other thing I found is we oftentimes say, well, Remington Gold lightning bolt, whatever it is the best in my gun. And that's generally true. But again, from that lot, generally, because in a month when they've switched over tooling and another guy's working on the production machines and setting them up, things have changed completely. So just because this box of Remington, green box shot really good in your rifle, that doesn't mean in 2 years you go down to the gun store, buy the same brand and expect it to shoot exactly the same. It may, but you got to be wary of that. And another thing you said, I never thought of this. I just had learned it over the years, but now it's an official tip from a gun writer, is I never worry about the bore on used 22s. For that very reason, nobody ever cleans them. So it may look awful, but until I know I've cleaned it real good, that's when I make the decision. And generally, I'll buy a rough bore used 22 because it's probably just let it up and got a whole bunch of gunge and cheeseburger crumbs and all that stuff. And it's pretty amazing. With the centerfire rifle, you can kind of tell, but with the 22, they almost uniformly look bad in the rack at the gun store.
Well, that's actually true. There's a classic 22 that chases the Ruger 1022. It's the Marlin Model 60, they call it. Mm-hmm. And it's the perennial discounts, used to be $59.99. I don't even know what they are now, but I mean, there's always a half a dozen of them in every pawn shop you ever go into. Yep. Every gun store you have will have Model 60, or Model 60s. And everyone says, oh, they shoot terrible, right? Well, except I bought 2 or 3 of them and they shot terrible. This was like 3.5 inches at 50 yards kind of a thing. And I thought, well, that's kind of what they shoot, apparently. No, clean the bore, clean the action out, squirt a little oil in there so the trigger pull was better. Suddenly it's shooting 1.5 inches. Yeah. And so I think that's really, you have to pay attention to that. And, you said something really important about if there's a lot of ammunition that shoots well in your gun and the next one may not because it's another production run. Well, I saw something at Jeff Hoffman's at Black Hills Ammo. His ammo is famous for accuracy and consistency. But what I noticed, and Jeff explained it to me, was that they have one guy who's only running maybe 2 loading machines, and so nothing like the degree of speed that they do in the really big plants and stuff. But I noticed this guy's always fussing with the machines. I mean, he's always watching things. He's always putting a little lube here. He's always making a minor adjustment somewhere. He's always picking up the cartridges and looking at them very carefully, miking them, going back, making, and so they're like constantly being attended to. And these big companies, it's like they Sven pushes the go button, and then everybody goes over here and has a cigarette.
Exactly. And
oh yeah,
when there's
and it's
a
like
big pile of broken ammunition under it, that we need to go check that out. Oh, they're fine. Let them go in the bin.
It's true. I don't even know if they inspect those bulk 22 ammos. I'm really not sure, Yep. But you have those machines going that fast, like it's a blur, right? And that, I mean, because I pulled 22 ammunition apart, and with the good quality stuff, it is much more consistent with powder charges,
right,
than the cheap bulk stuff. I mean, with the cheap bulk stuff, it's only like a grain and a half or 2 grains of powder, depending. I don't even know what the powder is, depends on the load. But, if you have a 0.1 grain off when you're talking that kind of volume, that's significant.
Exactly.
I mean, you've got a 10% powder charge variable.
Yep.
Which, if you did that in a center fire rifle, it would get like vertical stringing like a mad dog.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, yeah.
So we've talked ballistics and reasons behind that, and about ammunition. Talk about, and this is where I've not spent a lot of time, and that is in the modifying of the guns, and that's something Roy does on an hourly basis. So what are some of the things, and again, not to beat the point too much, but the guys that are really chasing accuracy can really get down in the weeds. And that's what I noticed. I was just on a forum today, kind of thinking about this topic. And it always starts with, how do I accurize my Marlin Model 60? Well, first you need an electron microscope and you need a vacuum chamber and whoa. No. So for folks that go on and if you want to do that, that's great. We think it's cool. But for like John Q. normal guy that just wants an accurate squirrel rifle or something that he might, beat his buddy in a target shooting contest, talk about some of the things that really make a big difference for maybe not as much money or as much time and trouble as some of these guys that really go to extremes.
If you're paying somebody to do the work, pretty much none of it makes sense for you to do with just a run-of-the-mill rifle. Because really what I would tell somebody is go spend $500 and get a Ruger Precision 22 rimfire, and you're done.
Yeah.
It's consistent, it's accurate, it's reliable. You can adjust the trigger. They're threaded for a suppressor. They're easy to put a scope on. The stock is adjustable. Hello, it's like, but if you just want to do something silly like I do, I have converted Remington Model 514 single shot 22s to different things. And for instance, this is a gun that was $14 when I got mine in 1963. And so I don't know, what would that be today? $100 gun.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's, even back then, it was a pretty cheap kind of a gun. But what I did was a very simple trigger. And so I did an action, so made the trigger more crisper, so it was a better trigger. I cleaned it thoroughly. I checked the chamber to see which round seated best in the chamber. And then most cheap 22s are notorious for having terrible muzzle crowns.
Right.
And so I recrowned it. And when I was done with the first one, I was really surprised. Because it went from literally like 2.5 to 3 inches at 50 yards. That I also cut tip-off scope mount grooves on the receiver, so I was able to scope them. And but after I did this very modest amount of work, really, accuracy dropped to 1.5 inches and sometimes 1 inch at 50 yards, which is really remarkable. You figure for a $20 rifle.
Yeah.
So that's what you can do. If it'd be interesting to take a Model 60, as you say. I would shoot it first to see what it does, right? Then clean the barrel, clean the chamber, see if you can get someone who knows what they're doing to make the trigger pull a little bit better. Those gold guns are gritty and they a lot of over travel and stuff like that. Recut the muzzle. And I'll bet you'll cut the accuracy in half. But I mean, to what end? Really go buy a Volkwartsen or go buy one of the new Ruger Match 1022s. I just got one of their new ones, and it's like, oh my gosh, what a nice rifle. All the work is done for you.
Yeah. And I would add Springfield Armory. They have a 22, and I forget the name of it. I've got one here. I've been using it. I used it during squirrel season. It is a tack-driver too.
Yes.
So
yes, and they're affordable.
Exactly.
I mean, people go, "What's $700?" It's like, well, you know what? I mean, everything is $700. If you want to go buy a good gun, it's going to be $700.
Well, to turn my Marlin Model 60, and I was going to say the one I've got, if I remember correctly, and I haven't researched this for a couple of years, so if my story is incorrect, I'm sure we'll get a comment that clarifies, but I believe mine's a Marlin Model 60W. And what that was a Marlin that was made for the Walmart Corporation. It's got a little medallion in the stock, and that's where I bought it. I bought it at Wally World, and it was probably my first new 22 that I'd ever bought, and just a nondescript, inexpensive, semi-automatic, tube-fed 22, and I've killed an awful lot of squirrels and other critters with it. But I was going to say, Roy, we've done stuff with Ruger Wranglers, which are a great. You've done thousands of dollars of work on a $200 gun. Maybe next time I come out, I'll bring my Marlin Model 60, and we can just see what we can do with it. At minimum, crown it and smooth out the action. The other thing I was going to say is, and I don't know if I would do it with this rifle because it's very light and comfortable to carry all day. But to me, being a bigger guy, most 22 rifles, especially the lower end ones, they don't weigh anything, and they've got little toothpick stocks, and it's hard to get everything all consistent and stable when it doesn't weigh anything and there's nothing really to grip. So something like a Boyd stock, I've got some 1022s that I've put into Boyd stock. It really, I've never measured the accuracy increase, but I'm sure that it's more accurate, and that's simply just a function of I can hold the gun better and more stable.
Well, I think, and yes, bring that gun with you because I think it'd be interesting. Don't clean it. Don't clean it. And then that way, when you get here, we'll shoot it very carefully. Yeah. And then we'll do those modifications to it and shoot it again. Now, I will say sometimes it doesn't make any difference. Yeah, right. I have no idea why. It's like, and then a miracle occurs and it doesn't change, right?
Yeah.
But I think a lot, if not most, of the complaints that people have about the fact their 22 rifles aren't accurate is because many people shoot them like they shoot a 22 rifle, which is as a plinker, right?
That's a good point, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so, because I've seen it, I see it here when somebody comes to visit, bang, 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 got any more bullets, and but if you take, fill in the blank, whatever rifle you have, because I almost will promise you, and I don't mean this is not egotistical, this is just I'm old and I've done this a lot, but if I know someone with a Marlin Model 60, if they shot it next to me and then I shot it, the chances are good I might be able to outshoot them with that gun, and it's simply because you hold it correctly, you breathe correctly, you press the trigger correctly, you follow through right. I mean, you got to give it a chance, right?
Yeah.
But if you plop it down, run the ball, peer through your 3/4 inch diameter fuzzy Bushnell sight, and start just bang, 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 bang like that, don't beat the gun up, because that may not be the gun's fault.
Well, that's a perfect segue into a point that I was going to make is it kills me, and we've talked about this before, and it doesn't matter what kind of weapon system you're talking about, whether it's a pistol or a rifle, a shotgun, well, not so much a shotgun, but still the idea applies. People want to modify and make it better, but they don't spend the time shooting better. And Americans are notorious for this. Well, if I buy this trigger and a new stock and this, and it'll shoot better. Well, maybe it will, but maybe you would have even greatly increase the accuracy even more by spending all that money on ammunition or maybe some professional training and being able to shoot. So that's it always in the back of my mind as a cranky old guy, that when guys are talking about, well, I want to increase my group or decrease my group size 50%. Well, are you shooting correctly? Maybe you ought to go out and practice and have somebody help you, a shooting coach. And then we'll talk about buying, an $800 barrel for your Marlin Model 60.
Well, it's the old, everybody wants a magic bullet or an equipment fix, and that's truly the case. I mean, if you hand Robbie Latham a high point 9mm, I promise you that he will outshoot everybody we know, right?
Exactly.
And if the guy who doesn't shoot very well has a $5,000 custom 1911, I mean, it might help him a little bit simply because the trigger will be better. But Robbie will still clean the yard up with him, shooting a high point 9mm. It's because he's shooting correctly. He knows sight picture. He knows trigger squeeze. He knows stance. He knows grip. And so he's applying all that stuff. And because I've seen it, people buy something like a Ruger Precision rifle. I helped a guy one time. He did that very thing, and he complained to me about it, that it didn't shoot. And I said, well, that's really unusual because they usually shoot really, really, really well. It was a 22 Magnum one, and he brought it over here. And so I said, well, let me see. I checked the scope. Everything seems to be dialed in right. I sat it down on the bench. I set up a target at 50 yards, and I shot a group that was one ragged hole, which is what that rifle will do. And he looked at me and he said, huh? And so I was able to work with him for just a little while, and suddenly he was shooting groups like that, and it was just all gun handling. There was nothing wrong with the gun at all. If you learn the basics, then you can apply them across the board. I mean, and you're the same way. If I got a new, slam fire fancy rifle out here, we're going to shoot it for a test, chances are pretty good we're probably going to shoot up to the gun's ability, because we apply our experience and, what we know of how to shoot a gun. And now you're exactly right. If we shot it a lot more, we would get better with it because you get to know the gun and you get to know the trigger and all that kind of stuff. But I really think that that's the most important thing, because if people come to me and they say, kind of like what we did here, we started, what should I do to my gun to make it shoot better? And the first thing I always want to say is, well, first let's talk about you and how you shoot.
Yep.
And we used to do a 1911 build class here in my house. Bill Lockridge from Cylinder and Slide Shop would come up. And so we start building a custom 1911 on Monday, and by Friday afternoon, everybody's shooting their guns, often in various states of disrepair, but basically we get them to the point to where they have a complete gun from parts. And it was really interesting because I remember we had one class and they were just this, unmotivated group of ne'er-do-wells. I mean, It was just there were 5 of them and they were just squirrels. It was really funny. And so we had to go around. It was constantly trying them to not do anything wrong. It was like, get a bigger file. It's like, no. Run across the room and stop. But on the Friday, they would all get on the backyard here and everyone got to test fire their gun, right? Well, we would set up I used to use, they're like 10-inch white paper plates and just staple a bunch on a target out here, maybe at about 10 yards. And, so the goal here was from a rest, of course, they just get to shoot their gun a magazine. And then Bill likes to look at the empties and you see where the primer's centered or and is the gun working? And so, but you're supposed to be aiming too, because it's when we adjust the point of impact with the sights. And so the first guy shoots and then he's like missing the plate. It's from a rest at 10 yards. And then another guy shoots, and he's shooting a shotgun pattern, not a group, And then the other guy would get 2 really good ones, and then one over here, up in the corner somewhere. And Bill started to look at me. He was looking at me, and he was going holy cow, is there something wrong here? Did we get a bunch of really bad barrels? I mean, he was starting to get really concerned. And so when everyone was done, he said, "Do you mind if Roy shoots your guns?" And so I said, "Oh no, I'd be happy to." Right? So I got some more ammo and I sat down. Of course, every gun shot just fine. It was nice little well-centered groups, And Bill was really funny, was because he said he looked at these guys. He said, "Well, did you just learn something?" And
but did they?
I don't know, but that was. I always say that to illustrate the point that I think often it's not the hardware with 22 rifles. When you reach that point that something like a Ruger precision rifle, that you will now be able to take advantage of that performance, well, not only is it satisfying, but I really recommend that you do it. I've shot Volkwartsen pistols and and all these fancy 22 rifles, and I have to say there's a subliminal pleasure in the manipulation of the guns, because they're beautifully made. And then I think it almost begs you to try to rise to the occasion. It's like, turn your hat around, spit your chew out, right?
I never thought of that, but you're absolutely right. Laying down, sighting in my Marlin Model 60 right before season with my, Remington bucket o' bullets is significantly less formal than when you've got a Volkwartsen and you've got these, individually packaged, So I never thought about that there's probably something to that. One of them, you kind of flop down and kind of get wallered into position and take a couple of shots. The other one is, okay, this is a formal event. I'll put on my tie and we'll carefully hand select each round and, get into position. And so
it's a difference.
It's all those intangibles.
It's like, I know people who sight in their deer rifle by, did it hit the rock or not?
Yes.
Which, okay, if you're shooting 50 yards or 75 yards or something, okay, that's probably okay, you know, but I equate it to the same thing and you see people with 22s, they'll shoot 150 shots on a target, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you've just wasted 140 of those shots. Yeah. Because you're not paying attention where they're going. You don't know what's happening with your trigger pull. You don't know if the ammunition is bad.
Yeah.
So I had some targets made up, and there's about 20 kind of $50 size circles on them. That's all it is. So if I'm sighting a rifle or even just shooting a rifle or a pistol or anything, I might set that up, if it's a handgun, maybe 10 yards or something, and you just shoot 1 or 2 shots on each little hole, because then you really know what's happening. And if you're sighting in a 22 rifle, I might set it up at 50 yards or something, and you shoot like maybe 5-shot group in one of those circles. And then you move to the next one, and then you move to the next one, and then you move to the next one. And that really paints a picture of what's happening, Yep. And so I think it's fascinating because the rifles are affordable. The ammunition's, reasonably affordable. If you have 50 yards to 100 yards, you've got as much distance as you will ever need to have a lot of fun with your 22, so yeah. I think people should chase that because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, to summarize, I'm going to call this, why is your 22 so picky? Because that was kind of the question that inspired me. But let's recap what we talked about. So with your 22, try a lot of different ammunition, clean the barrel, make sure the gun is clean and functional. A clean gun's a happy gun, and shoot a lot. And then that's when you go buy something even better. Anything I missed there, Roy?
No, it's true. And shoot a lot, only shoot carefully. A lot. Like, I would rather see you shoot 10 really careful shots than a box of 50 today. People, sometimes you get, when I do one of these videos on a single shot rifle, it's always the same. Usually people say, wow, that's a cool rifle. That's really pretty. I understand. I love the idea of single shot rifles and all that. It makes you slow down, makes you appreciate shooting. But invariably there's somebody who wades in and they'll say, well, that's stupid. I'd rather have a 30-shot magazine in an AR-15. That's a lot better, And it's like, okay, if you want to do that, there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't know what you're learning when you do a mag dump of 30 rounds from your AR-15,
Yeah,
But
that's funny. I think we've talked about it years ago when we did the subgun podcast. Is there's nothing more disappointing, more anticipated than disappointing. You load the mag, you're ready for it. Okay, I'm going to do a mag dump, and then now you're done. And you got to load the magazines and all that.
Clean the brass up.
Yeah. It's yeah. Okay.
I'm going to go out. Yeah, I'm going to go out on a wire here, or on a limb, I guess. And that is that if this sounds interesting to you, if this is kind of new to you, or maybe you've just got one old beater 22 in the closet or something, go and buy. Savage makes a really good target grade single shot 22 rifle with aperture sights, and it's not a lot of money. It's like $400 maybe. You probably can get them cheaper than that, or somebody else's bolt action 5-shot magazine or single shot, something like that. Buy one of those, because chances will be it's probably a decent gun. If you find a clean old used single shot bolt action 22 at the gun store, give it a check out, look down the bore, see if it's got all the bones are there, and buy that. And now, for the next year, shoot that rifle, And when you shoot it, keep your brain on. So when you pull the trigger, you can think back and think, what was my sight picture like? How was my trigger press? But, how did it feel against my shoulder, the buttstock? How was I holding the forend right? I mean, think about that. And so you're teaching yourself, and you're going to learn a lot, I promise you. And you'll probably end up with a new favorite rifle.
Probably. It's funny. That's a great note to close on with a 22. And we've kind of talked about it. It doesn't ever feel like training. There's so much fun to shoot but they have such a value as a trainer, and that's why countless gun models have been brought out as trainers, because it is a great training platform. So yeah, go out and plink, go out and shoot, go bust bottles in the dump, whatever, but take some time to actually engage your brain and train. And I think you'll probably get better. Your gun will suddenly improve in accuracy, and you didn't do a darn thing except train that loose nut behind the gun. So
you just accidentally came up with a new slogan: engage your brain and train.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
pretty good.
I'm a poet and don't know it.
Yeah, engage your brain and train. Because even if I'm plinking out here, and I plink with a 22, I've got a cool little falling block Savage 72. I just put an old-fashioned scope on, and but I plink. I've got a 100-yard dueling tree, so there's little round things at 100 yards. I plink just for fun shooting. But you know what? I pay attention. I take my time. I look at the sight picture. I think about pressing the trigger. It's still fun, but it's engage your brain and train.
Yeah, engage your brain and train.
That's what we're doing.
Well, a great place to end this 22 episode on. So leave us a comment down below. Tell us what your favorite 22 is, what you've learned from shooting your 22, or your favorite tip for increased accuracy. So Roy, it's a little cold. It was 2 degrees this morning here, and I know some of our friends up in the northern states like, that's a heat wave, but for around here, 2 is pretty darn cold, but we'll be getting out and shooting here sometime in the near future. But in the meantime, we'll call each other up and we'll talk about it and record it, and hopefully everybody has fun here on the Guns Magazine podcast. So thanks again for joining us. Well, I had a great chat with Roy, and hopefully we've all learned a few things about how to make our 22s a little less picky and a lot more accurate. Well, before we go, a couple things I would like to remind you, of course, if you want to buy a subscription to Guns Magazine or American Handgunner Magazine, our sister publication, you can go to fmgpubs.com. You can get subscriptions. You can buy Roy's new book, The Insider, John Connor's book, The Odd Angry Shot, and a whole bunch of other great stuff. That's at fmgpubs.com. Also, don't forget, please check out our great sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com, AmericanCop.com, and, of course, GunsMagazine.com. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of everybody who works so hard here at FMG Publications, I remain, Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you yet again, now get out there and get shooting.